Now, speaking of mayors, you ran for mayor.
I did.
And the current mayor, which would probably imply that you did not win for mayor.
I did not win.
You did not win.
Out of 12, I came in last place. Makes me first at something.
Hey, there you go. First at being last.
Yes, I am.
So, but you learned a lot of stuff running for mayor, and you also recently were able to talk to the current mayor. You scheduled a meeting with him, and he actually was like, hey, let's sit down and talk.
We're familiar with each other.
Yep.
We don't always agree.
Right.
That's for sure.
Now, you sat down, and you had a number of things that you wanted to talk to him about, but one of those things was car stuff. And so if you're not aware, if you're listening outside of Colorado Springs, of course, this show is heard all around Southern Colorado on the radio, several great radio stations that you can catch this on. But I do have listeners on the podcast internationally, and I'd like to think you maybe like a little bit of an insight into the car scene here, the stuff that's going on here.
They might have similar situations in other places.
It might even be worse. Who knows?
Probably.
Could be worse.
Maybe.
Could be better. I don't know. But it could be in California.
Ooh.
Imagine that. But having said that, and by the way, like a good neighbor, if you're in California, like a good neighbor, stay over there in California.
Well, you can come, but keep your weirdness that way.
He's defending it because you came from California a long time ago, though.
This is my 16th year.
16 years. So I think that's honorary.
I'm adopted.
Yeah, you're an adopted Coloradan. But we'll forgive you for a little bit of Californian. But but so you talked to Mayor Yemi, and his name's Yemi Mobolade. He's the mayor of Colorado Springs again. And where we're at right now is that it is against city code to store a car on your property, anywhere on your private property, essentially, if it's not registered. So, like, say you have a project car, or say me, I've got a track car. It's at the moment not registered, because it's a track car. So, per that city ordinance, I guess the one place it is allowed is in the garage, technically, covered up in the garage.
Not everybody's got garages.
Not everybody does.
Is that fancy, and not everybody just has vehicles for the streets, and not everybody's not building something. Sometimes people are building stuff, or it's projects that are covered and stored, or whatever it may or may not be, or stuff you're building with the kids, the family, or I do know of a few people and organizations that help veterans with PTSD and do a lot of car builds and track stuff and everything. There's a few of those out there. There's many other circumstances, but my big argument with it is that it's private property on private property, and then most of the codes and stuff, you don't get. Did you remember voting on any of the codes?
Didn't vote on a single code.
Do you remember voting on being told what to do with your stuff that you worked all day for to have?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember getting a decision or a choice or a chance to even go, nah, I'm good. I bought these with my Chuck E. Cheese tickets after working all day. And this time I got more than an eraser. I got a car. We'll build it later. Or a car and a parts car. Who cares? It happens.
Yep.
All of us car people, they're familiar with that, right? Sometimes you get 3 to make 1. It just is what it is. Or you're like, this doesn't have any of it. There's no left side on this. The right side's good. There's no front, but the rear's good. And it takes time, part and stuff. Or if you do some of the stuff I do, you got the kids and they're building something, and it is forever.
Well, and let's highlight the importance here of, because a lot of people are going to say, well, we don't want junk cars parked in the city. We don't like how that looks. It's a safety hazard. Let's point out, especially with project cars, because I know not everyone listening here on the radio is going to be a car guy like us. Maybe you're just somebody who's driving to work here and there, point A to point B, but you have a car. Maybe you've got a neighbor who is a car guy, and you're like, why is he always doing that stuff? Well, the thing is, working on cars, wrenching on cars is an amazing outlet for folks, too, especially, you mentioned kids, teenagers, too.
Angst.
Who it keeps them out of trouble. Put that, maybe frustration they've got from school and life, right?
Idle hands are the devil's playground. You keep the kids busy, or you keep people that got some angst or anger, you keep them busy and learning the skill. It keeps them out of trouble, and they're being much more productive with their anger or angst or rage or irritations.
Yep. And not only that, they're learning some skills while they're at it.
Very much so, some skills. To be self-reliant.
Self-reliant. It's not just, maybe they don't want to become a career mechanic. That's okay, though. They know how to change their oil. They know how to change the spark plugs. They know how to, fix a flat tire. That's stuff that's really important. That I would say, by the way, should be a prerequisite to getting a driver's license at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be something to do before you can be driving around.
Yeah. So now let's take a look here. You had you've got some papers there with the ordinances. Let me take a look here. And
that's lots of papers.
That's a lot of paper here.
While you start reading and looking, though, let's be honest with the car culture stuff. I personally, from the best part of not caring, I don't care what you're doing on your private property. I really don't. You want to have cars and build them? That is a billion times better than being a drug dealer, to being a sex trafficker, a rapist, a pedophile in the neighborhood, a drug house, a trap house, any of this nonsense that's really bad in the world or bad in the community. Being a car guy is not bad. Does it get unorganized sometimes? Yes. Does things get parts and stuff? Does it get dirty? It does. Like anything that has to be built or put together, there is always a time where it is like, holy crap, this is almost looks like a disaster to bring something old back to life and to bring it back to a very good position, to a very good condition. And it takes a long time to find and scavenge parts. You can't always find them next door at a parts store. Sometimes you're tracking stuff down from what? Across the ocean, for crying out loud.
Right. And it can be hard. You got to buy multiple cars to do that. Now, I was taking a look here, and we had gone through this earlier as well, but I want to give you some of these ordinances here. Whereas there are some exceptions, roughly. Like one exception is you can park a unlicensed vehicle in, like, say, your garage or stuff like that. But they also have an exception, and this is really weird to me, for collector's items. You might say, okay, I've got a 40-year-old Corolla that apparently was in an anime or something, and that's a collector's item. But here's the thing here. It says, vehicles defined by Colorado revised statutes, blah, 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 as collector's items or parts cars, provided that no more than one vehicle so defined shall be kept outside of a building on any one property. And it says, essentially what that's saying is that you can have a parts car, you can have a collector car, but you're only allowed to have one. And the question becomes, we can get into the nuances of this. We could get into the nuances of, there's some things here. But I think it comes down to a fundamental discussion of principle, which is that a car that you own outright is private property and it belongs to you.
You earned it, you bought it, it's yours.
Exactly. And the same thing can be said for your private property, your physical property, your home, or whatever that may be. So the idea where they're making all these conditional statements, well, you can have a collector car, but you can only have one. And I was looking for it because I spotted it earlier in the show, and I'm not finding it now as I'm skimming through the papers, but there was an exception in there too for cars of like a certain age where it's like, okay, if it's pre-1976, I think, but only if registered before 2009. There's all sorts of like dumb stuff in there. And again, we shouldn't get caught up on the little nuances of that. We shouldn't get, because I think that's a little bit of a distraction for one. It's none of that matters. It's that the city shouldn't be able to tell you that you can't park your project car.
Wasn't the whole point of getting your own place is to be left alone to do your own thing anyways?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, do they have this many rules when there's a drug house in town?
Oh yeah, good point.
Do they?
You can only have one drug house. If you have two, that's no. And it has to be registered before 2009.
But that's not important. But us being into cars or building. Look, I understand. Some of us are excessive with our car stuff. That's fine. But there are way worse things to be into. Way worse things to be into.
Absolutely. And cars they're productive.
A lot of life lessons in there doing stuff. I mean, you can teach the next generation a lot about how this stuff works. A lot of life lessons are in it. Like, hey, look, you got to take like 10 pieces off to get to this, to do that. Yep. So sometimes you got to go a little backwards to move a little forward. And then they'll be like, hey, apply that to your life. You're okay. Hey, you're angry. You're mad. It's fine.
Yep.
That's going to happen in life. What are you going to do about it? It broke. What are you going to do? Fix it. That's it. It's not a bad thing. I'm tired of it telling me what to do with my own stuff. There's a lot of us tired of it.
Yeah. Well, and look, and
if you want that kind of stuff, live in an HOA.
Yeah. And the thing too, like, for example, like, technically by the book here, it's not legal for me to take my track car out of my garage and park it in my driveway. Bear in mind, not on the road, driveway while I work on another car in the garage, right? Now, have I been cited for that personally? I haven't, but that's also probably because code enforcement just hasn't happened to roll through and look at the license plates from the street.
For the record, code enforcement is just roll around anyway. Somebody calls, dare you have a neighbor that hates you or somebody that drives by and don't like you? That would just be terrible.
Imagine that.
I don't need to.
But now, what I want to get into here too a little bit, and we've only got a minute left in this segment, so we'll carry it on into the next one. So we've already spent this whole segment essentially defending our position that we both share. We're both in complete agreement on. But I do want to talk about the mayor's position because you did have a discussion with him.
I did.
And so I do want to get into a little bit of that and discuss what did the mayor say? Why
he emphasized on the enforcement aspect of it, that code enforcement is enforcement. And I said that there's some things they do that just ain't quite right.
Yep. So we're going to get into that and more. Oh, we're going to talk about the new International Scout. Yes, it's back, and it might be an EV, and it's also made by the Germans. How does that work? We're going to get into all of that and more. You're listening to Automotive ADHD. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a minute.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
Yes, it is. Got Jim Miller sitting across the board from me here. We, before the break, were talking about some city ordinance stuff that's kind of weird here in Colorado Springs. Maybe it's weird where you are, too, if you're here in the Springs or listening nationally on the podcast. But we were talking before the break about how it's crazy that you actually cannot park a unregistered car on your own property if, like, it's your driveway.
Yeah,
we're not talking about the street. I think we can kind of agree that, all right, fine, the street is technically public, okay, sure.
We all pay for it.
Let's
share it. Do it the right, super legal, extra rules way.
Right.
Way.
Yeah, but no, we're talking about, like, in your own driveway. And so Jim, if you weren't listening before the break to get you up to speed, he went to talk to the mayor. Now, he ran for mayor, but we do have the current mayor as well, Mayor Yemi Mobolade. And he went to talk to the mayor and get the mayor's take on this. Why is it that we have to register cars that are parked even in our own driveway, not on the street, not blocking the sidewalk or anything? And that's, I think, a direct attack on car enthusiasts. I can't see any other reason really for it. So, and we went through a couple of the ordinances in the last segment, and
maybe they want us to all buy electric.
Maybe, but it's got to be. You can't have more than one, and it's got to be registered before 2009. We did find. I was saying in the last segment not to get caught up on the details, but I did finally find the details in all this paperwork. They define a collector item, which they say you can only have one of. You can't have more than one collector item, which is unregistered.
What you can own.
Yep, and a collector's item. It meets here. This is Colorado Revised Statute Section 42-12-101, if you want to look this up. Collector item means a motor vehicle, including a truck or tractor trailer that is of model year 1975 or earlier, or 1976 or later, that was registered as a collector's item prior to September 1st, 2009, or if it wasn't registered before 2009, it must pass all state emissions tests. What are we? Look at all these hoops that we have to jump. It's crazy. And again, what we said in the last segment, it's our take is that it's your property parked on your property. And by the way, you don't actually, in this county, the county I'm in, you actually don't have to do an emissions test here in El Paso County. So the fact that in order for your car to qualify as a collector vehicle under a certain circumstance means it would actually have to pass more emissions requirements than it would to be on the road registered, which that's amazing government bureaucracy right there is what that is.
I just want to know who made these rules. We didn't get a choice in it.
Didn't get a choice in this one bit. Now, you did talk to the mayor.
I did.
What was his take on this? What were his thoughts?
That we contract and agree with all these codes by living here.
Okay, so because you live here...
Because we live here, we get to be told what to do with our stuff.
Okay. And he kind of was a little more maybe lukewarm about it.
Code enforcement's just doing their job. It's enforcement almost to the point that they're law enforcement officers. That it's what they have to do. So I didn't really care for that much, to be honest with you. I think the car enthusiast perspective is quite different than most other people's. Look, I don't like bending a knee to anything. That's just me personally. I think a lot of us that have private property or have hobbies or takes, we like our work away from work. We like our stress away from the stress. That's what keeps us kind of going and wanting to continue to fund everything and be taxed half to death and overworked. We have our few vices, cars, whatever it is. So I didn't like any of that, to be frank with you. And I don't think he quite gets that we like to build things.
Yeah. He sort of, and if I remember, we were talking about it before the show, he kind of said, oh, when you brought up that objection, like, hey, this stuff is going on, didn't he kind of say, well, that's kind of a Jim thing, right?
Yeah, like
that's just you.
I'm the only car enthusiast in town. I'm the only car collector around in town or in the city limits. And I'm like, I'm not special. It's in the title. I'm just a guy. There's nothing unique about me. There's probably more people like me than really like him if you really get down to it. People that like to build their own things and do their own stuff and be left alone and not be hassled with extra bureaucracy or rules or harassed or violated or having people walk around on your property without you present, thinking that it's fine for them to just access it. Mm-hmm. I kind of could see a point where it's like, hey, fence or gate your stuff so I don't have to stare at your things. Okay, I could kind of see that. I still feel like it's kind of bending the knee a bit, but I don't mind finding mid-ground. I don't necessarily think that Mayor Yemers is bad or evil or nothing. I don't think that. I just think coming from a perspective of people that know how to build things and build things versus someone that doesn't build things and doesn't know how to build things or hasn't built anything is a very different perspective because we know how to get dirty and do things and, we'll bleed over making our projects complete and we will lovingly, happily drop every bit of extra effort into it.
Yeah. Now, I'm kind of just thinking out loud here, too, because, we're here on the radio, and, yeah, we're sort of preaching to the choir if you're a car guy. You're oftentimes going to be on kind of board with what we're doing. But, for the folks that are just kind of sitting here being like, well, yeah, but I don't want my neighborhood to turn into a junkyard. What kind of middle ground do you think we can find to that argument? Because I do see some thought of like, okay, yeah, but what if my neighbor's got 18 cars parked in his yard?
They're his cars, it's his yard. Maybe if you want to not look at it, maybe help your neighbor put a fence or a gate up. Maybe not be so worried about what they're doing. And if you want to be that neighbor that's so worried about what's going on in your community, why don't you go, keep a good eye out, make sure there's no pedophiles, no rapists, no sex traffickers. Make sure there's no people selling drugs to children. Mm-hmm. Halloween's coming up, right? Make sure,
it is, yeah.
Make sure no kids are going to convicted sex offenders' houses. Make sure there's just not weird things going on. Make sure nobody's selling drugs or trying to drug children.
Yeah.
If you want to be that effort and that concerned with your community, the car community is not the community you need to fight against because most of us have the same morals, values, and ethics to you. And honestly, it's like the whole thing, like I like to say, we all agree actually 100% of the time via what you may or may not hear on the interweb or the radio or the TV or whatever, because we all want it better. But really bothering the hobbyist, it's not a very good thing to do.
Yeah.
Focus on a real problem. We're not a problem. We're not destroying the communities. We're actually probably keeping them more settled and a lot more focused by teaching those that could possibly be a problem to have a car hobby, whatever you want to be instead.
At least in our case, it's more of an addiction, but yeah.
Yeah, the point being with it, it's just cars. They're just stuff, and it's our stuff. It's not your stuff to tell us what to do with it. Whether you are a bureaucrat, the system, the government, a neighbor, a person, or somebody just passing by going, I don't like the way that looks. You know what I say? You don't like the way it looks? Look somewhere else. Look for a real problem. Don't invent one. quit making us your adversaries.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to tail onto that with, and I think it's partially some portions of the automotive enthusiast world are kind of problematic. We're talking the street takeover guys, the people who are taking stolen cars and doing donuts in the middle of an intersection at 3 a.m. with like 30 onlookers and all these other cars. These street takeovers happen. They happen here in Colorado Springs. I think part of it is, for one, as car enthusiasts, like you said, we share the same morals, ethics, and a lot of the same ideas that a lot of people who maybe are kind of anti-car do. But I think we also get a little bit of a bad rep. We get bundled into some of the actual criminals who are taking cars and doing criminal stuff, the street takeovers, which, again, I've said this before on my show. The street takeovers are absolutely terrible because, I mean, they make us all look bad, for one. They're dangerous as all get out for both the drivers, the onlookers, and the property owners.
And they stole some hard-working person's stuff.
Yeah. So I think
most of the time,
you know, one thing you say on the radio often when you listen during the week is if you want it better, you got to be better. And I at least think as car enthusiasts too, we should show the rest of the world that, hey, we are good folks. These cars are fun. They help teach people skills. They keep people off the streets. Let's not make it necessarily a bad thing. We'll be right back on Automotive ADHD. Don't go anywhere.